Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I commence my presentation by saying boldly that Budget 2022 is yet another manifestation of the PPPC government's commitment to improve the well-being of the Guyanese people. Mr. Speaker, it represents another step in fulfilling our commitments to the electorate. This budget is wide-ranging, and I'm convinced it has placed present and future generations of Guyanese at its center. Undoubtedly, Mr. Speaker, it demonstrates the PPPC's unyielding commitment to unlock our country's potential and improve our people's lives. During these debates, I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, we will hear much more, but I dare say, given its scope, time will be insufficient to address all of what Budget 2022 envisage. But I'm not worried about that, Mr. Speaker, as the PPPC government is not one long on talk, but one focus on results, aimed at delivering improvements to our people. Mr. Speaker, we from this side of the House, we are not like my friends in the coalition. We live up to our expectations and deliver on our promises. As a trade unionist, I paid keen attention to the improvements Budget 2022 offers working people and their families. I can say, Mr. Speaker, without hesitation, that our people have much to look forward to. Indeed, there are challenges, and there will always be, Mr. Speaker. But Budget 2022 tackled these challenges frontally, bringing relief to our people in many forms. Mr. Speaker, the budget attempts to reduce the cost of living and at the same time improve workers' disposable income. Given nowadays realities, these are needed and welcome initiatives. The hike in the income tax threshold to $75,000 monthly represents a 15% jump. This improvement, Mr. Speaker, means that no worker at the public sector minimum wage will be required to pay taxes. I repeat, no worker, none at all, at the public sector minimum will pay taxes because of this budget. This initiative alone puts $1.3 billion in the pockets of our workers. I recognize for our workers who subscribe to life and medical insurance, these premiums are now exempted from income tax. This is a further $1.1 billion in our people's pockets. And for our ordinary people, their interest payment accruing from their modest savings at the bank will now be exempted from withholding taxes. This is a testament, Mr. Speaker, of the government's commitment to the ordinary working people. In recent months, Mr. Speaker, the question of cost of living has attracted much attention. The budget noted these hikes were largely related to global circumstances. They are simply beyond our control. Mr. Speaker, but this did not daunt our government. The PPPC government has developed innovative measures to mitigate the present-day realities. Such initiatives confirms where the heart of the government lies. It is unlike what prevailed in the era of the coalition, when everyone feared that new burdens would be placed on their backs. This budget is progressive, Mr. Speaker. It is progressive, I emphasize. Mr. Speaker, I'm heartened to see sustained efforts being made to eliminate the legacy of burdens bequeathed by the coalition when it was in office. This is the nature of a caring government, one which has the interests of the people foremost. The efforts of the budget to continue to mitigate as best as possible the efforts of the cost of living is indeed welcome. Extending the cost of freight adjustment is one such tangible measure. It demonstrates that though we remain a small developing country caught in the throes of international crisis, we are making steadfast efforts to spare our people the effects. This is commendable, Mr. Speaker, and points to the caring nature of the Dr. Irfan Ali-led administration. But this should not surprise anyone. The PPPC, whenever in office, Mr. Speaker, has always sought to protect our people. I welcome the further reduction of the excise tax on fuel, which seeks to bring further reliefs to our people. I certainly expect, Mr. Speaker, that these savings, cost of billions of dollars, will be transferred to our people. Indeed, it was with them in mind, I believe the government pursued these initiatives, and our people have high expectations. Mr. Speaker, the establishment of farmers' market is another notable feature of Budget 2022. This meeting of farmers and consumers is a win-win arrangement. I look forward, Mr. Speaker, to the early establishment of these markets, which will bring reprieve to our beleaguered farmers and our exploited consumers. The restoration and now improvement in the school child uniform grant allowance is yet another win for the Guyanese people. Mr. Speaker, through Budget 2022, the aggregate sum jumps nearly 60% this year. It is a triumph for our children and their parents. It ensures more of our children get the support they require and deserve. But the budget went on, Mr. Speaker, proposing the distribution of tablets and flash drives to ensure that task of education is delivered and received by all. Mr. Speaker, it was the opposition, when they paraded the corridors of power, who snatched away the school child grant, leaving our children empty-handed. The nation must be reminded of this. I know the emphasis the budget has placed on safeguarding the vulnerable and elderly. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, improvements in both old age pension and public assistance, together with other initiatives of Budget 22, will help those in our society. At this juncture, Mr. Speaker, I recognize the efforts of the government to assist those receiving dialysis. I have learned of the hardships people in this situation are encountering, and for Guyanese, Mr. Speaker, this policy is simply commendable as it brings much relief. I commend the government. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2022, I believe, has not missed any area of national life. Every man, woman, and child will gain from Budget 2022. This is the nature of the PPPC, which ensures that development is all round and no one is left out. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, those who crafted Budget 2022 had a difficult job. They had to balance today's challenges with tomorrow's opportunities. Indeed, despite formidable difficulties, I'm of the view that they did a remarkable job. Budget 2022, while keeping an eye on today, has laid the framework for a song tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, we should all be excited for what this next chapter of national development brings. Our young people and next generations of Guyanese have a lot to look forward to. Speaking about young people, I recognize, Mr. Speaker, significant sums earmarked for training of our youth to take up opportunities in the oil and gas sector. These opportunities come as the implementation of the Local Content Act commences. That act, Mr. Speaker, I contend, represents a significant win for our Guyanese workers and ensure that they rightly benefit from our natural wealth. It also seeks to right the wrongs of the lopsided agreement signed by the coalition government, my friends on the other side of the House. The new legislation opens many doors of opportunities, and together with the government training programs, many of our young and not so young people will further contribute to the development of our great nation. But Mr. Speaker, I recognize that is not all. Our people now more than ever have opportunities to become highly qualified. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this is in keeping with the objective of ensuring Guyanese develop Guyana. The Gold Program alone is providing opportunities to thousands of Guyanese. Undoubtedly, many of the naysayers who had labeled such initiatives as a pipe dream are now surely embarrassed. But as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, the PPPC government is a government and a party that is focused on results and not idle chatter. Mr. Speaker, as someone who has been connected to the sugar industry for a long time, my contribution to this debate would be incomplete should I not spend a few moments to address developments in the industry. Just last Saturday, I saw our colleague, the newly elected PNCR chairman, Honorable Sherwin Holder, reportedly contending that the industry requires a broader assessment. Mr. Speaker, I felt my sight had deceived me, as when the PNCR was in office, they say then they had no time for that sort of examination. They said that those who wanted such examination should do it themselves. Mr. Speaker, I was there. I heard it with my own ears. And the Honorable Mr. Ramjatan was also there. Mr. Speaker, to educate my young colleague, the assessment the Honorable Member touts has already been completed and is publicly available. The socio-economic assessment, supported by the International Labour Organization, concluded, I quote, a key overarching factor that played a very important part in the livelihood of laid-off persons and their communities, and in the prospect they had offered the closure, was the shared dominance of the sugar estate in the economy of the communities that surrounded each estate. The incomes, the rhythm of life of individuals and the communities, the aspirations of families, the opportunities that existed for alternative employment, the types and successes of business ventures, the services available in the community, every single thing seemed to depend on the functioning of sugar estate. Ostensibly, if a sugar estate were to close, its effect would not be just be felt on the livelihoods of immediate workers and their families, but it would affect the entire community. End of quote. Mr. Speaker, I saw not unexpectedly the coalition in its usual partisan self denouncing the government's continued support to the industry. At their press conference last Friday, Mr. Speaker, they said the money should be used to retrain the workers to move out of sugar. But, Mr. Speaker, they should be the last to talk when they heartlessly closed the estates, Mr. Speaker, putting more than 7,000 workers on the breadline. They throw in just 130 workers. That is less than 2% of those they send home. And, Mr. Speaker, had the honorable members from the coalition are talking about retraining, Mr. Speaker, our friends on the other side, except the Deputy Speaker, of course, continue to charge the industry is not moving forward. But, Mr. Speaker, had the honorable members decided to show up last Wednesday when the budget was being read, they could have washed in the fountain of wisdom and avoid putting their foot in their mouth. Had they been present, they would have known that sugar is on an upward trend.
You have reached your time allocated and will need 5 minutes to continue that upward trend.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask your permission for the honorable member to
Honorable
be
Prime
given
Minister.
5 minutes?
Thank you. Honorable member, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They would have learned that efforts to repair the damage they inflicted while in office has seen the industry reducing its annual losses. But, Mr. Speaker, when they were in office, they continue to be irresponsible with our people's business. Mr. Speaker, much of what is being done in sugar today was told to the coalition when in power. But myopically, like in many other areas of national life, they choose to ignore genuine advice. Mr. Speaker, emphatically I must say that under the PPPC government, sugar has a bright and secure future. Continued investment by the government, Mr. Speaker, will bring the industry initially back to break even and eventually to profitability. Unlike the coalition, known for their tearing down, Mr. Speaker, the PPPC is known for building up stronger and better. Mr. Speaker, I conclude by commending the government on what clearly is an impressive budget. Undoubtedly, it is the product of the collective efforts of the entire government. I also wish to express congratulations to my colleague, the Honorable Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh and his team at the Ministry of Finance, who must have spent many hours to refine and fine-tune Budget 2022. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2022 will consolidate our gains, bring us closer to our ambitions, and build a stronger Guyana for all of us. Mr. Speaker, I commend Budget 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, Mr. Narine. I now call